Welcome to Growth Hobbies Podcast, a CEO series. Join us as we dive deep into minds of CEOs who shapes the business world. Let's listen to what they do, why they do, and how they do. Meet the driving force behind the innovation and master strategies. With your host, Meghna. Are you planning to start cold emailing as your lead gen campaign? Or wondering where to start? What all technical setup would you need? How much time would you have to spend in this? Will it succeed? What all things and additional tools would you need to succeed the campaign to make it more personalized? I got you covered. Hey Frank, welcome. It's very honored to have you on a show. I'm very excited to meet you. We've been talking for a long time now, and it's time to know about Salesforce. I met you sometime back when you were doing some market research for the Salesforce. Yes, and I also remember that you were launching on Product Hunt. So let me know more about the Product Hunt and let me know more about Salesforce, the people who do not know about that. So what it is and how it differentiates from the other vendor out there in the market, because there are a lot of competitions. So all
good question.
Hear you.
Thanks. Hey everybody. So Frank, been in B2B sales for well over a decade, leading large sales teams, frontline sales rep, worked with a bunch of companies, Google, etc. And then decided finally to fix a humongous problem that exists these days. And that's why actually I built Salesforce together with my team. And really what we're focusing on in terms of the pain point areas is email deliverability. So in full, even owning email infrastructure that we're actually launching next month. And then the other piece is actually around programmatically assembling unique emails at scale in different languages. We have some clever logic in there. But yeah, we launched on Product Hunt in September, just early on. So we decided straight after the summer, probably it's a good time to launch. It took us maybe a couple of weeks to decide, a couple of weeks prior essentially to decide on the dates, do some prep, and we ended up being second of the day. So really pumped for the results. Unfortunately, not number one, but we decided to go for the most competitive day, which is a Wednesday. And you can see some stats also online. There's a bunch of dashboards. You can see when is the best to launch, etc. If you definitely just want to get the number one spot, go for like a Sunday or a Saturday. You can definitely get the number one spot if you get your whole audience together. The reason why you may not win necessarily, that's totally fine. It's about getting the visibility. It's also a fantastic opportunity to do teamwork with the rest of your team. So because you're online, you're messaging people, you're creating the buzz, updating LinkedIn, Facebook, like in different places. But it's okay if you don't get the number one spot. And I think nobody really cares if you're 1, 2, 3, etc. You get one of these badges, that's it, you pop it on your website, you get a backlink, which is actually the number one really good perspective from an SEO standpoint. But you're getting a bunch of feedback. You're getting probably a few deals that you're signing. So we also signed a few deals, though I must say that it's less so maybe relevant in the B2B context, but more so relevant in B2C context. So you're going to be more successful if you have a B2C proposition. As I mentioned, you're gonna get a bunch of feedback, which is super important. You're also gonna get reviews and Product Hunts, and you can use these reviews also on your site like testimonials. So we've actually done that, so you can see some of them on there. So overall, really pleased with the results. We had like 1,400 votes, and we lost to another competitor on the day, which is the fun fact, who also are doing emails. So essentially, it's a company called Loops, a YC-backed company with millions and millions of dollars in backing, going up against a bootstrap startup. But we knew we're not going to win. But we didn't give up, of course. And, we tried to be the number one, but every time we were pushing it, we saw that Loops were actually overtaking us all the time. But nevertheless, it's just fun fact that you're competing against another email platform. But then looking at our direct competitors actually that have launched ever in Product Hunt, I have not seen a more successful launch than our launch. So I'm super pleased that looking at direct competitors, we're actually the top company in our segment for the number of votes, activity, and many other things. So super pumped about that.
I was impressed. I was impressed with the launch that you did, and that is why we are here together and having a podcast together. So congratulations once again for it. But since Salesforce is more about cold emailing, let's get to know more about it and how it's differentiated with the other platform, and how do you stand out or plan to stand out yourself. So I'm more excited to know about the Salesforce now.
Yeah, so typically when you're a startup or just a business in seeds, Series A stage, looking to scale, typically the only real things that scale really, really well and very, very fast is either doing cold emailing, doing cold calling. Cold calling is super effective. So that these are the two typical outbound motions. LinkedIn doesn't scale if you're looking at that. So these are the three really main channels. Everything else doesn't really matter. And then on the inbound front, really the thing that scales really well is advertising. And guess why Google makes that much money? Because of all the high intent traffic on search. And all the other options like SEO, etc., that takes time. And guess what? Startups don't have the time because they have to prove to their investors that they're growing. The deals are coming through, etc., etc. And cold email became super, super difficult over the years. So 5 years ago, you could just create, one domain. And you could be blasting hundreds and thousands of emails from your, single domain, and that was okay. But unfortunately, the user experience has deteriorated over time. Whether you were using Gmail, Outlook, etc. So a lot of emails were landing, and a lot of users were complaining. And the way that they complain, they click on that magical spam button when they see an email. And most of the emails these days are templated, so most of the times they're horrible. And all that kind of started really from an outbound perspective from a company called Outreach. So they're the number one player in the space that started to do this sort of sequencing. On top of Salesforce, on top of HubSpot. Sequencing meaning sending multiple emails to your individual. So this is where the users started to receive more emails. So instead of just receiving one email, they started to see follow-ups. And some companies sent like 10 emails to their user within a span of a month. It's horrendous. So Gmail and Outlook decided to crack down on that. So over the years, essentially, any company that was sending essentially emails from their primary domain, a lot of those emails started to land in spam. And it got so worse that, for example, I spoke to a client last week that were using one of these solutions, and they have a huge audience, etc. But their open rate for the email, so they do track open rate, was 2%. I've never seen an open rate so low. So typically the benchmark within the industry is below 30%, but I've never seen a 2% open rate in the industry. It was so bad, and they're not the only ones. There's a bunch of companies that have less than 30% open rate by sending emails from their primary domain. And the topic is rather very complex, but really the solution to this dilemma of low open rates and people essentially then calling email being dead or cold email being dead is it has to do because you're using what I call a legacy setup process, whatever, all of that essentially. So you need to migrate to what I call a new generation platforms that are designed to land in the primary essentially. And part of the puzzle is there's a lot of things that need to be done, whether you need to warm up your domains, whether you need to validate email addresses to ensure your bounce rate is low, because essentially bounce rate correlates to automation in the eyes of Google, etc. That's one of the reasons why you land in spam. But more so important, which became more of a hassle, is that you essentially started to use what's called a decentralized or distributed sort of email infrastructure. So instead of using your primary domain to send out emails, you started to use secondary domains. So you essentially you started to de-risk essentially having any email deliverability issues with your primary domain. And so the reason why you're doing that, so let's say these days, you're going to be sending, a bunch of cold emails. Yes, you have less than 30% open rate, but guess what? It doesn't impact just your cold email motion. It will impact all of your emails. So whether you're contacting your investors, trying to raise another round, or speaking to your existing clients, your deliverability for your whole domain will tank. And the worst case that can happen, and it has happened, has been trending on LinkedIn this year, is that Google started to ban the workspaces. So imagine if all your employees would be locked out. So essentially Google suspending the whole workspace with all the employees because somebody in a sales department decided to send too many emails. And then you got too many spam reports, and then that's it. Google takes an automated action to suspend your workspace. So if you don't want that to happen, you want to de-risk from that ever happening, is get, a few domains. Let's say, in our case, Salesforce.ai is our domain. So you get try Salesforce.ai, get Salesforce.ai, team Salesforce.ai. So at least like 3 domains. And then against every single domain, get up to, say, 2-3 mailboxes in total. And then this is how you can essentially build out your infrastructure to any really scale that you wish. But with that sort of infrastructure, instead of getting less than 30% open rate, you'll be getting 50 to 80% open rate, which is a typical healthy open rate range. It's highly unlikely you're ever going to get to 90 to 100% because a lot of people just don't open cold emails, from unknown senders these days anymore, and many kind of other reasons. But 50 to 80% is like really good. So imagine what would it mean to you if you had double the number of eyeballs looking at your email. And typically that means double the results. And that's super important. So yeah, you really need to think about your infrastructure going forward into 2024. Google has announced recently also news a few weeks back that they're looking to crack down on essentially emails from unknown senders. This is not necessarily cold emails. It could be anything. Specifically, if you have a lot of users at gmail.com, it applies to that. But you have to do all the basics, and there's a bunch of information online. Just Google it. If you need any help, we also do free email deliverability checks till the end of the year to help to boost your deliverability next year. But it's super important, and email still works. And the reason why email over any other channel is because it's the most CAC efficient channel still today. That means is the most cost effective. As long as you are following, doing things sort of by the book, by the new book, essentially, you'll still see results. And most of the businesses in B2B can generate business through cold emails. So it's just, having a new sort of setup, infrastructure, process in place, and just speak to somebody that knows something more about this. So it's not just me, but there's a lot of experts in the industry. So whether that's yourself actually, Megan, or there's a bunch of other super smart cookies in the world of cold email.
It's interesting, a lot of technical, but I will just summarize that yes, we need a separate domain, then we need a separate domain than the main existing. And of course, and one another thing that I like, yes, you're giving a free deliverability check. So that is even additional value, right? So thank you so much. Yes, of course, we're going to go more detail into the cold emailing and a lot of technical stuff we will be talking. But before we start, could you please tell me a best cold email or message that you've liked and that has attracted you?
Yeah, so that's a very good question.
Most people love that.
Yeah, so think of it this way. So it doesn't matter whether that message lands either in your primary inbox or even in email, whether it lands in LinkedIn or whether it lands in WhatsApp. It lands, and typically you want to land in a channel that's the least saturated. So email is very saturated, specifically in a lot of industries. So this message has landed actually in my WhatsApp. It was a cold WhatsApp DM. I have nothing against cold WhatsApp DMs or even receiving an SMS, but there was this guy. He was as SDR at a company called Sales Impact Academy. And it's a UK-based company. They do a lot of educational stuff for SaaS companies, educating all around sales, etc. But what he did is essentially the reason why it sort of resonated, he just did a video. So I'm very receptive to videos. I like when people sort of personalize. And I'm trying also to learn something from that. So I would never just mark something that's, something that's authentic, essentially. That's something that has not been automated. I would always look at it. I would always suggest it and think about it. Maybe that's of value to me. And actually, I did book a demo after that. But what he did is, instead of shooting sort of video typically on a desktop, he shot a video on his mobile device. So he went on my LinkedIn profile. He was just calling sort of randomly on the LinkedIn profile, and he was talking about it. But the reason why I piqued my curiosity is because it was on the mobile device, so that video was shot, and then I received that on my WhatsApp, and because it was formatted, like a mobile video essentially, it was formatted to a mobile device. And guess what? Most of the messages, if they do come to your WhatsApp, you typically open up on your mobile device, right, through your app. So that's what I did. So it was nicely formatted. Everything that the guy said, it was fantastic. So kudos to him. I did tell him, he did a really great job. But it's a fantastic pattern interrupt, because these days, whether you're doing cold emailing or anything else, it's about pattern interrupt, because a lot of channels are very, very saturated. So do something unique that nobody else does, really. So just have your own sort of angle. So this is why sometimes when I share something, let's say on LinkedIn or something, I don't share some of the tidbits because they're rather unique, and I don't want people starting to essentially replicate this stuff, because if we're going to be all sending the same sort of tactics or unique angles to our prospects, it will become saturated. Prospects will start to getting fatigued. So one example, let's say on LinkedIn, was that so somebody was using this tactic like, hey, my CEO has asked me to reach out to you, and then the SDR was using that to reach out. So there was this message was forwarded, and then the SDR sort of forwards to the prospect. So this tactic has worked maybe sort of 5 years ago, but it doesn't work anymore. A lot of prospects have received this sort of email, so they're fatigued to that. Maybe that's something unique to that company when they're sending it out. But guess you have to put yourself always in the shoes of the prospect, that they got those emails already. So when you go on Google online, what sort of template could I use? Because that template has been already used so many times, your prospects know the trick, essentially. And because they know the trick, you're actually ruining your credibility because of that. So if you are trying to do some of these sort of, let's call it tricks or whatever, make sure that they're just unique to you. So you have just thought of it. You have not necessarily researched that. I mean, feel free to research it, try and see if somebody else did it. But if nobody did that, go ahead. And so that will be something unique, authentic, and etc. But don't necessarily templatize, because essentially anything that's templatized, an email template, a tactic, etc., it could be used by somebody else, and that means the performance of that may have worked for that person in the past, and they may say, "Oh yeah, I had 20% reply rate," but won't be necessarily working for you because fast forward, let's say 2 years later, a lot of people receive similar email, and gradually just the response from that tactic just kind of drops really.
It's exactly resonate me because as a ABMer, you know that I exactly personalize message. That is what I do all the time, right? So as a ABMer, for me, personalization and doing something interesting is what I like, and it's what I'm passionate about. All right, I'm just going to tell you out of this, it's still lagging, but I know how to fix that. So we're going to continue on the recording, but I'll tell you just to do how to, because I asked Riverside that what to do it at that time. So they have told me the solution, but that's at the end of the day. So just we'll have to give some more extra pauses here. So never mind, we can start and continue with our questions. It's going well, never mind. So since we know all the technologies, and I love that sending WhatsApp message that you've received, and non-saturated channel marketing is something unique stuff that I would take it from this discussion. Yes, you need to approach the way it's not been templatized. That's what attracted to me. I love this. So let's get more into the technical parts of the cold emailing and cold emailing. So about IP reputations and domain, domain validations. All does it happen in Salesforce, or do you help us for the setup for the new agencies or new vendors? They're going to start a new organization who are going to start the cold emailing. How do you help them for the technical setup? And what is that needed if somebody is just starting out? Could you just tell me more about that?
Sure. So every user is being sort of what I would call looked after or handholded. And in a very simple way to look at this is, well, we have, let's say, an onboarding checklist that exists in the app once you sign up. And the first thing that it asks you is to book an onboarding session with me. So we give free onboarding sessions, and that's all done by me because I do believe very much in connecting with people in the community and giving them a short cold email masterclass just on everything that we're discussing right now or everything that's may happen next year, and really help them to build out at least their first steps properly. So let's say the infrastructure. So whether they decide to buy the domains from a domain registrar like GoDaddy, Namecheap, or whatever, I can always advise where to buy from or where not to buy from to increase the likelihood of success overall and maximize the probability of always delivering your emails in the primary. And same goes with mailboxes. So do you buy from Gmail? Do you buy from Outlook? Do you buy from somewhere else, etc.? Next year you can buy it from us even and stuff like that. But one tip maybe is just go to GoDaddy and buy from there. It's the number one registrar in the world. Where not to buy maybe your domains. I would not recommend buying domains from, for example, from Namecheap, because Namecheap is very well known to be banning actually accounts. And you can read a lot about that actually on Reddit. So just search for Namecheap and domain issues, etc. So kind of validate. So actually, if you need sort of any validation or like real raw reviews, just go on Reddit and just search for stuff, and you'll find some raw reviews essentially by the users. What do they think about different kind of domain registrars, etc. And then when it comes to sort of Gmail and Outlook. Personally, if you already went with GoDaddy allows you to buy Outlook accounts, as an example, within GoDaddy. And it's very easy, sort of simple to set up. And so I would do that. And plus, Outlook doesn't necessarily ask you for 2FA. So that means the authentication, via mobile telephone number, which can become maybe cumbersome when you use Gmail. Because if you're, let's say, switching IPs, so let's say multiple people are working the same account, then the IP changes, then you need to get this, verification code, etc. It is a hassle. And it kind of, one of the reasons why we're also building the private email infrastructure. So yeah, I mean, a lot that goes into kind of overall domain health. So beyond sort of buying the domains and having first initial mailboxes, the next step becomes you want to make sure you're sort of warming up these domains, because on day zero when you buy a domain from anybody, the email service providers and everybody in the email ecosystem does not know whether these domains would be used, say, for good purposes or the bad purposes. So the bad stuff is sending ransomware, phishing attempts, a lot of bad stuff. There's a lot of bad stuff in the ecosystem that Google and Microsoft filters out for you. So very grateful for that stuff. But then there's the good stuff. So meaning business A sends an email to business B. So to be classified in that category, what they want to look as healthy usage metrics essentially within these domains and mailboxes. And that means you have to send emails, you have to receive replies, making sure that none of these emails that you sent out have been marked as spam. Super important in the first few weeks, typically at least 2 weeks. And that's called email warm-up. So that concept has, been coined sort of a few years ago to warm up the domains to build up the reputation, essentially. And instead of doing that manually, so it used to be done manually actually in the past. So you used to get people in different parts of the world essentially doing this manually, sending emails, etc. And then companies became sort of technology advanced enough that they were able to build out this as an automated solution. As in the system, you will just send emails from domain A to domain B. You'll get replies back, and then if your emails ever land in spam, they will be also in spam. But you want to do this process at least for a couple of weeks. And then beyond that, you always keep the warm-up on, because it sort of acts as your anti-spam mechanism and always kind of boost your overall deliverability. So I'm not going to go too much into detail on that, but like super important and super critical that you have this today or going to next year. Doesn't matter which provider you use. But warm-up is super important, that you kind of check it out and buy from one of the vendors warm-up and kind of boost your deliverability.
So when you talk about how often, like how much is a maintenance time we have to spend, and how often we have to do this kind of a maintenance for when you're doing this campaign?
So typically there's a lift in the early days. So the day zero, you decide that you want to do cold emails. So the first thing you think is about infrastructure. So let's say if you're going to decide to buy 3 domains and some mailboxes against that, it'll probably take you half a day to kind of get this all set up correctly. So like I mentioned, so we have an onboarding session. We also have onboarding guides, and then users ask us questions if something is incorrect. We also flag when something is incorrect, as an example. With their domains. And then from a maintenance standpoint, what you want to do within any platform is check what is the sort of the health of these domains. And some companies have this deliverability sort of score that they calculate, and each platform has their own score, funny enough. So it doesn't mean the same thing when you log from platform A to platform B. But the one simple way to look at it is like I mentioned, so there's this warm-up capability, right? And one of the things that they typically do is they sort of unspam your emails. And as long as that platform provides you information whether your emails land in spam or not, that's a sort of good signal whether your domains have been sort of burned or not, essentially. So for example, in our platform, you can see that, okay, some of emails, let's say, consistently have been landing in spam over the last 10 days. That means that domain has been burned. So you do 2 things in that case. You either should stop using the domain, first of all, and see if it recovers. It could take some time, so nobody knows how much time would it take. It's very hard to answer this question, actually impossible. But the more sophisticated people, what they do, especially those that are operating at a very large scale, their systems, these are typically agencies that have many clients. What they do is they very quickly replace that domain. So they spin up a new domain, new mailboxes, and that's a lot better thing to do, because at the end of the day, time is money. Waiting for something to recover is bad from a process standpoint. Just replace that domain with another domain, warm it up, or keep some domains or mailboxes in sort of in the back office. Don't use them, and then if something burns, kind of replace them with an already warmed up domain. So this is what the most sophisticated companies would do.
That's interesting. And how often do you recommend? It's like monthly once, or how often? Like, is there any ratio that if I'm spending 2,000 in email a month, then I have to check 15 days or in a month? So how often I have to check the domain health?
Once a week at least.
Once a week I have to check.
Yeah.
Okay, so that I know.
Because typically you want to just see in the last 7 to 10 days what was the what's happening with your domains. Are your emails landing in spam or not? Sometimes everything is fantastic, and then suddenly, bam, your emails start landing in spam, and you can see that And if it's already happening like for 3-4 days, that's it. So something has happened with that domain, and you have to think to yourself what you want to do about it. So I do weekly checks. I just randomly check all the domains, see what's happening with them. And then I make a decision essentially as to the next steps. But yeah, depending on how big your market is, what sort of your activity that you're doing. But on a monthly basis, I would do something with those domains, like get new domains, replace the domains, do various different bits and bobs. But every company has their own process around that. If you're a startup, you have to do it yourself. If you're a big company and you have an IT department, well, you may want to agree with your IT department to maybe take care of that. However, IT people don't want to be doing that. So you need to figure out a way, essentially, how do you how do you circumnavigate that in the way? And what I recommend actually doing is, let's say you're using G Suite, so Google Workspace, for your primary domain. And I always recommend to get actually a separate workspace where your secondary domain lies. So at least another workspace, if not more, for various different reasons, like, not to be banned, this example. And then in that workspace, you just agree with your company that the sales reps will do everything. So you don't have to involve the IT department. As long as the management signs off, so the VP sales or your chief revenue officer signs off that that's all good and dandy to go, companies, like us and everybody else would support you, other companies hopefully would support you, essentially get that ball rolling, kind of get it up and running. It's not, too difficult. It's definitely tedious a bit, but it's doable. I mean, it's what you should be doing, right? So your goal is to, make revenue for the company, right? And in the early days, maybe it was just about sending emails, doing call calls, but the game is becoming more sophisticated. So what I imagine how the world will evolve actually over time, especially in the sort of large organizations that have, a team essentially, you will have these sales development engineers instead of sales development reps, because there'll be essentially more sort of automation, more sophistication that you'll need to put into this whole thing. And yes, it will become harder for everybody, but at the same time, it's also good for the whole ecosystem because it will get rid of the real spammers essentially from the ecosystem. So everything that's happening is actually good for legit companies that have legit products to sell, legit services to sell. If they're selling something sort of scammy, etc., that's where we want to get rid of these sort of people from the ecosystem. So it's just like you need to have sort of a new playbook for your email motion going forwards.
Interesting. And it's interesting that yes, of course, we need to learn all these things, and still yes, but I do not see that there is an extra IT department would do it, because I was been working with IT department, and I don't think that, but I think it should not be that difficult, and salesperson should be able to do it easily if they learn once or twice from the email providers, right? That should be good. So since we have all the setup done, technical setup done, let's dive deep into list cleaning and data providers. So could you tell me more about which data providers, what all list, how do you clean the list, which data providers needs to be taken, and what is your opinion about it? I know everybody will have their different opinion, but I would like to know your opinion, since you are decades in the industry now.
Yeah. So what do you want to kind of know about the data? Data is like, one of the 3 critical components of cold emailing. So altogether is like the data, number 2 is email deliverability and scale, number 3 is the copy. What's the messaging that you're sending and how frequently, etc. So on the data front, you need to get the best possible data, really, because getting crappy data will mean crappy results, really. And many companies these days, because of the brand awareness, they typically go to a company called Apollo.io to get their data from there. Apollo is very famous these days. They have a product like Growth. You can get a free plan. You can check out the data, do some sequencing there, like many other things. So that's the typical suspect that you would have in the space. A lot of people use them. Though there's also a downside to that. So when a lot of people use the same list, that means that person is getting probably a lot of emails. The best leads that you want to get are the ones that nobody's reaching out to because their inbox is clean, right? They're receiving nothing. And these people typically hide, not share the email addresses somehow, right? Stuff like that. So there's different ways maybe to tackle this. So let's say, or I spoke to somebody today with a startup. So they're just about looking to figure out where to get their list. So we discussed, some of the directories where you could scrape these directories. If somebody needs to figure, how do you scrape? It's just get this tool called Instant Data Scraper. It's a Chrome extension, and you can scrape for stuff for free. So let's say you go to some directory. Let's say I'm targeting agencies, an example. So I would go to the one of the agency directories. Clutch is an example, and then you would sort of scrape from Clutch as an example. And then you let's say get the email address. Let's say you get the website, but you may be, let's say, missing the email addresses against that. So then you may need to go, let's say, to Apollo to upload those websites, and then you get some email addresses of the titles that you want to be targeting. So that's one approach of kind of scraping to get maybe a list that maybe nobody else is using potentially. Then there's many other ways to kind of scrape various different things. Sometimes people scrape, let's say, on LinkedIn. There's a bunch of different tools. For example, one would be, let's say, find email tool. So let's say you have a list in your sales navigator. These are the right titles you want to go after, but you also need to get their email addresses. So you go and use find email. Find email essentially takes the list within LinkedIn and gives you the email address for every single person. But think from not just this is the best list, but think from a standpoint of nobody's probably contacting these people. Now maybe you will be the only one. And one thing I advise never to do is to buy lists. Never buy lists. You probably have received, if you're a startup founder or whatever it is that you're doing, you probably have received an email from at outlook.com. There's somebody contacting you saying, hey, we have these titles, we have users from your competitors and a bunch of other things. Never buy. Please never buy, because you're fueling these guys and their data is stale. So the big problem with data just generally is that it's called what's called data decay. So yes, they have a lot of data, but data is out of date because people leave jobs very frequently. Just recently, yesterday, I read that on LinkedIn, over 1 million people in the world of tech have been laid off this year. And that means, those email addresses, they will bounce, etc. So just to summarize, either use a database like Apollo, there's a bunch of other ones, either use the scraping method, or the third one is these companies that do waterfall style sort of enrichment of data. So they use multiple data vendors to help you maximize what's called a lead coverage, so to have maximum possible leads. So one example of that would be Clay.com. Clay.com became really popular these days because you can pull data from different providers and put that into a list and then do a bunch of other things. So a lot of kind of sophisticated stuff. So these are the typical suspects. Now, what you do after that, so the final piece before you go into copy, is make sure you validate that list. So it doesn't matter where you get that data from, whether you scraped it or you got it from a poll, etc. And whatever it is that they said it's verified. Trust me, when somebody says it's verified, it has not been verified typically in real time. So real-time verification is very important. So that means you get your list from somewhere. You're about to reach out to these individuals on that exact day. Please verify that list, and then you essentially upload all the safe ones into your email platform. We do that natively actually within Salesforce. It's a critical step.
That is the exact question I wanted to ask you, and since you answered me,
Yeah, so it's a critical step before you write the email copy. So before you write the email copy in Salesforce, we validate the list. And then you decide what you want to do. And trust me, it's not that simple, which is not just verified versus not verified. There's a bunch of other categories. And then it depends on your risk appetite. Do you want to reach out to this category of leads or not? Then you decide what you want to do. But it's not that simple. And the reason why this is important is if your bounce rate is relatively high, it will impact your deliverability negatively, because high bounce rate correlates to automation, and that means automation means more of your emails should be going to spam, according to Google and Microsoft. Super important on that front. And that's why it's important.
Great, you told me about data scraping. Yeah, last week I was developing a AI prompt. I'm doing a little bit of AI engineering as well, although I'm not very good in it. But I was doing how to scrape the data, and I was taking and I did some prompt which is to scrape the data. Although it's not has come out well, I'm still working on it. But I'm working on that to scrape. So could you give me another tool? Do you have anything not only on LinkedIn but also on social media like a Facebook and Instagram, influencer post, and whoever they are commenting on that, if we could get some data from there? Do you know any tool that you could recommend?
Yeah, sure. There are these channels where it's a lot more difficult to sort of penetrate or maybe use these basic tools. So there's some dedicated tools that, let's say, for design, maybe for Facebook groups or to scrape Twitter follower or for an influencer in that industry that you're in. An example of that would be prospects.com. So something that we also use. Prospects.com with two S's. So just search for them. They do Twitter scraping. So for example, in our industry, what we would want to do is probably look at somebody that's an influencer in the cold emailing space on Twitter, and a lot of people then follow that influencer, and then we'll kind of reach out to them. So that's, very simple use case. And it can work really well because you can kind of anchor that in that message saying, hey, I saw that you're following this person, and I was wondering whether you're using, any of these tools, or how is it that you're tackling. It's just, one of the unusual, let's call it, ways, yes, of finding your audience and anchoring on the fact that they're following that person. It works actually typically really, really well.
Really well. Yeah, that's what I'm working on these days, and I thought of asking you this question during this interview because I'm sure this is going to be helpful for the listeners. Yep. So we are finding some different ways to reach out and to attract the clients. So that's what. Thank you so much. All the information was very, very informative. Let's get more into this deliverability. So how deliverability is important, and what are things that you would take care, and what should we do, what should not we do? Could you guide me on that?
Yeah. So on the deliverability front, just overall, there's quite a few things to take into account. So first and foremost, like we already discussed, email infrastructure. Next step becomes setting up DNS records. Super important because DNS records do impact deliverability. So when you're sending email to one of the recipients, what the email service provider does, it does check the DNS records and then can make a decision based on the records whether to accept your email or not. And your email can bounce if your DNS records have not been set up correctly. So it's a typical suspect. I can tell you, many companies in the world have not set this up correctly. And it's one of the key reasons why your emails land in spam. And it's very actually easy to fix, whether you use our Help Center article for that or something else. It's the same typically fix. So DNS records is one. Then from another aspect, what you want to kind of think, and it kind of goes into more sort of what sort of content is it that you're sending, because that impacts deliverability. So for example, what you don't want to do is use sort of these spammy words like free, for example, or I don't know, lottery. Like there's a lot of spammy words, and you can search for one of the tools online. I think Mail Meteor does, for example, a spam checker. So Mail Meteor, spam checker. Just search for that. It's a great spam checker. Just put your copy into that, and you can see from a deliverability standpoint whether there's any spam words in there or not. It's something that's coming also on our platform as well, so that you can do that seamlessly within the UI. So content, so kind of spammy content or just content generally is super important. And on that front, what Google and Microsoft don't like is that you're sending the same template all over again. So because what happens is when the user flags that message for spam and then these emails go to other users, then your emails, your further templates will land essentially in spam, and it will say something like in Gmail, similar messages in the password marked as spam, which is the reason why we decide to put it into spam. So what you want to do is you want to make the copy sort of unique or randomized. So one of the two. So randomized meaning, so this is when you particularly decide, okay, I'm going to use a template. But you want to randomize essentially content within that template. It's super important that it happens with the first initial email, because the first initial email, the strategy, the goal of that first initial email is to land in the primary. That's the goal. So as part of that, the content has to seem like unique on the receiver end. So what you're doing is essentially, let's say you have a seed word, let's say hi. And hi can be said in many different ways. So it could be said, hey, hello, hey there, etc. And that concept, so randomization concept, is called spin tags. So if you just search for that spin tags, Salesforce, you can read, like, say, an article on that and how it works, etc. But essentially saying the same thing in many different ways. So you have to write it up. And you can do that for single words, for sentences, or paragraphs. And I recommend that at least 50% of the initial email content is spin tags, essentially. At least 50% before you decide to use that template. So that is the randomized, what's called rules-based approach to tackle the issue with deliverability. Now, the second one is what we call programmatic approach to assemble unique content in every single email. And that's essentially using AI. So essentially using large language models where, let's say what we do is we look at what we sell as a business, and we match it what we know about the prospective buyer based on their website, LinkedIn profile, many other data sources, and then we have these data sources, and then the AI crafts unique, short, and snappy email. And every email is unique; it's not a templated, and that uniqueness is essentially what drives emails more into the primary inbox rather than spam. So content is another one, and then the other aspect that you want to probably thinking is there should be no sort of images or links also in the initial email. It's totally fine to have links and images in the follow-up emails. And the reason for that is, think of it, let's say from a link perspective. Behind a potential link, there could be ransomware. And sometimes the spam bots or detectors, when they are checking what's behind a link, they can't figure out what is that link really used for. So they can't say for themselves, okay, it's actually a link that's, the goal is to unsubscribe from that email sender. So instead of actually delivering that email to that employee in the company, they either will deliver it to spam or will not accept that email in the first place. So what companies do, instead of, let's say, using unsubscribe link to be compliant with CAN spam and GDPR, etc., they would use, let's say, a text snippet at the end, which would say, hey, if you don't want to hear from me back, please say stop or whatever, right? So you can have a text snippet at the end. So that also works really well. Now, on the kind of images front or like video front, don't put them in the first initial email. Also have no images in your signature, etc. So a whole essentially content block. Any images that you want to put them in the follow-up emails. Though the emails actually that have typically the best results, one of the killer features in the industry across any of the email platforms is to stripping that HTML out of your email. And essentially you send the email as a plain text, just like you would send it from from your Gmail UI. You would send a plain email to somebody else. If you're stripping HTML from an email, it has higher deliverability. So these are some of the tidbits on kind of the content aspect. Now, kind of overall, sort of maybe sequencing strategy, how many emails you should be sending. And think of it this way. If I'm receiving a cold email from anybody as an unknown sender, so I'm receiving it from them, so I received an initial email, and then I'm receiving another email, and then another email. How many emails does it take for me to report that sender as a spammer? And you have to kind of juggle this, they need to be... They need to be, kind of sending more sort of follow-ups, to drive the highest probability of a reply versus getting a spam report. And typically, I would say kind of the most optimal is to be sending 3 emails in a sequence, because after the third email, typically the likelihood of getting reply back is very, very low, and the probability of increasing, the probability of getting a spam report is very, very high. So you kind of always need to juggle that. So send 3 emails in total. Then use other channels like LinkedIn, give them a call, etc., whatever that is. But don't send more than 3 emails. Maybe one of the best strategies is actually, connecting, let's say, first on LinkedIn, if you have, a small number of leads in the TAM, and then actually sending an email. So there's, a couple of touch points there. But initially it starts on LinkedIn, so you're kind of putting the face to the name, and then that name actually sends you an email. So it can work really well. And then once those 3 emails are completed in the sequence, then just follow up with the same person, say, after the quarter. So re-engage. So have these sort of re-engagement campaigns or sequences. And it works much better. And the reason why this is super important is because one of the things in outbound sales that you cannot control is the timing. So you can't control the timing. So you're reaching out to a prospect, they don't respond to you, even though they are your ideal customer, there's something that does not allow them to kind of come back to you for whatever that is. So guess what happens? So let's say I reached out to somebody in August this year, and then I reached out to them yesterday, and guess what happened? They replied back. And it's most likely the reason was the timing. So it's super important that you have create this sort of, loop of, okay, I reached out to them, nothing happened, that's fine. I reached out to them again and again and again. So you have to kind of strategize around that. How do you do that? What should be the touch points? Are we doing multi-threading, for example, and stuff like that? So multi-threading means just, reaching out to multiple individuals at a company level instead of reaching out to one person, because if you're reaching out to 2 or 3 people, and you can do that simultaneously, as long as the messaging is unique to every single one of them, feel free to do that, because the conversion rate of closing a deal is significantly high. It has been proven through a lot of data. So don't take my word for it. You can search for it online. There's a lot of information that says if you're reaching out to 2 or 3 individuals at an account level, the probability of reply drastically increases. So do that either in parallel or sequentially, reaching out to different individuals at the company. Super important. And so these probably would be my kind of some of the other aspects I would look from an email deliverability standpoint. I bet there's more, but yeah, I think this should do for the beginning.
This is interesting. I, as an ABMer, when I'm doing the account-based marketing, I'm exactly doing something similar. That I'm going to reach out to the CEOs, then I'm going to also reach out to HR. I'm also reaching out to CFOs, understanding his point of view and solving each person's solution problems and their own personal goal. So with my campaign, how their goal will be met, because it's not the one person who takes the decision. And I also like the re-engagement, like, I was impressed when you said re-engagement campaign. It's very important to re-engagement. Sometimes somebody says, we are not interested now. It does not mean that they may not be interested after a few months. So they may be interested after that time because we have changed, their requirement has changed. So re-engagement campaign is always work for me very well. And I always say, like, my mantra, look at it like, leads are in the list. So when you say leads are already in the list, you have to keep repeating your list again and again, or kind of segment them. That's what I do. I segment my list. Even that time, even if somebody has said no, I keep them into the another list where I'm going to re-engage with them after some months. So that's how my process looks like, and it's interesting. Thank you so much. It was a lot of interesting stuff that we got to speak, and a lot of
Yeah, thank you so much. If there's any questions, guys, that you have, feel free to find me on LinkedIn or whatever else, or just send me a cold email, actually, if that's what you wish to do. And yes, like I mentioned, we do free email durability checks. If you want to just check up your domain, etc., feel free to ask me for that. I'm happy to kind of spend 10 minutes of my time to help you out. And otherwise, good luck next year. It's going to be a tough year. I've heard from a lot of investors, startups, etc. It's going to be a downturn maybe for the first 3 quarters, but then after that, in Q4, it should be very rosy. But don't be discouraged by that. It's about persevering through hard times, and typically you come out really well on the other side of the end. So yeah.
Thank you so much.